how's it going everyone? This is Dominic, and today you're tuning in to the Comic Book Report, where we review comic books and graphic novels so you can get an idea of what to read. And today, as I peruse my shelves, I'm just going to get right to it. Today, I've been selected to be the Omnibus Cafe's YouTuber of the Month for the month of July 2024. For those that perhaps don't know, Omnibus Cafe is a Facebook group that discuss all things comic, collected edition, and yes, omnibus. Really happy to have been chosen as their YouTuber of the month, definitely humbled, so thank you everyone. And if you're watching because this was on Omnibus Cafe's page, welcome. As I mentioned at the top, this is the Comic Book Report YouTube channel. My name is Dominic. My channel is largely a faceless channel where I try to just showcase the books themselves. 2 to 3 times a week, I'm always doing things like comic book reviews, unboxings. I do a lot of top 10, top 5 list videos. Every so often you might see a comic related short, and I'm just starting to dabble in live stream video. At any rate, that's a little bit about me and the channel. If it's your first time, thank you so much for checking this out. I hope you stick around, maybe find some content here you like, and if not, thank you for clicking on this. Now, for the remainder of the video, Kevin and Sal at Omnibus Cafe did ask me 5 comic book or YouTuber related questions that I'll go ahead and answer here, again, as an effort for those that are interested to get to know me and the channel a bit better. And to help exemplify my answers for these questions, I've selected from my library about 10 different books that I'll be just casually flipping through as I'm answering the questions. Anyway, I really hope you enjoy my answers, and again, it's been a huge honor to be named the YouTuber of the Month over here at Omnibus Cafe. Thank you so much. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, diving into the first question today, what inspired you to start a YouTube channel? And before I dive into my answer, we are going to be looking at Batman Rise and Fall of the Batman Omnibus. This is the James Tynion IV run on Detective Comics. I'll also be flipping through briefly the Fantastic Four by Jonathan Hickman Omnibus Volume 1. But back to the question at hand, what inspired me to start a YouTube channel? I guess to answer that, we go back a couple years. I just hit my channel birthday for this channel, The Comic Book Report. I've been doing it roughly 3 years now, which is just wild to think about. But what got me started, I remember when YouTube first came out, almost 20 years now, I think. Anyway, I remember when these videos were coming out, I always liked YouTube. It was kind of in the background or periphery of my life. I always did think it would be cool to start a channel, but at the time I didn't really have my angle of what exactly I would do with the channel. I didn't have equipment or any way to really edit, so it was just something in the back of my mind, kind of always. I am in general a creative person, I would say, so I always like having a kind of creative outlet, and in many ways YouTubing is one of the ultimate creative outlets I've ever found. More pointedly though, I think what finally drove me to start it was I was starting to get back into collecting comics, because I did take maybe a 5 or 6 or longer year, maybe 7, 8, I don't know, a good handful of years off from collecting comics. I'd actually sold some of my collection, and I was just starting to dabble in buying comics again, and I was looking for comic book reviews that were a bit more extensive than what I was finding on, let's say, something like Amazon. And I had the idea to look at reviews from comic book YouTubers. And I found channels like Near Mint Condition with Omar, or Gen Mint Collectibles, and those were, again, some of the bigger names I had found that specifically seemed to like review comic books or omnibus that I was interested in. So that was kind of my gateway into this whole subculture or niche on the internet of comic book YouTubers, and it really got me, it started, making the gears turn. I know with Near Mint Condition in general, I've always loved Omar's attitude, and I love the way he presents books. And Gem stuff was really good too, and these were the bigger channels I found initially. And then the more I started like watching these videos and kind of jumping from one video to another, I started to find smaller channels that would kind of specify, or, this channel focuses on indie, this channel just focuses on omnibus, or what have you. And I really started to like what I found. I even found the comments to sometimes be super valuable, and I just thought that this was a really cool place to be. And as I built my collection back up and I was watching more of these reviews, it made me think that I would like to try it. And yeah, I just had my iPhone, I just had kind of rudimentary equipment I bought fairly cheaply, but I thought, you know what, I can put together comic book reviews, and I can find a space to showcase these books, the formats, kind of how the publishers put these things together, the make or build quality, and I could speak a bit about the books, which I was really enjoying. I could do some unboxings, I could kind of just embrace that whole YouTube subculture. And I think more than anything, I was really looking for a community of people to just share my interests with. I'm thankful for all the beloved family and friends in my life, but there are so many in my day-to-day life that don't like comic books as a hobby like I do. But through these other channels, I was finding such a big and really warm community that just enjoyed passionately reading these books, talking about these books, sometimes buying and selling these books, and I thought this was something I really wanted to engage in and really just add to my life. So that's really what I did here. And you might be wondering, why did I pick these two books to flip through? Well, honestly, these were comic book runs I was interested in that I knew like nothing about before, searching out some of these videos on YouTube. So when I think about, that time in my life and what got me started, I think about books such as these or runs such as these that really talk about just these characters in ways that I wanted to know a little bit more about. Next question for today, how did you first get into comic books? This is a really funny question. I actually just did a secret origin video for me that discussed kind of my journey getting into comic books, but I'll kind of rehash just a little bit of that early chapter of how I really got plugged in. And while I answer this question, I will be briefly flipping through the Amazing Spider-Man Omnibus Volume 1, as well as my trade paperback collection of Spider-Man Blue by Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale. I think how I got into comic books is fairly simple, but it was a multi-step process. I think in general, my dad was someone who really collected comics back during the 70s, 80s, maybe early 90s. So when I was growing up in my household as a 90s kid, I would always see like his bucket of comics that we'd sometimes take out, he'd show me. He always just liked comic books. We'd talk about them here and there. When those comic book movies really started coming out, like I remember in 2000, I think we got X-Men and like Spider-Man with Tobey Maguire. And even before that, obviously all the Batman stuff we got, Chris Reeves Superman, all of those kind of things I'd always watch and talk about with my dad. Also on TV, I'd watch things like the Spider-Man animated series, or I'd play the video games for all of these different superhero characters. I'd wear the t-shirts, and I just really liked the kind of superhero genre. I was really familiar with these characters, just again, from growing up with my dad and just culturally, but I never really read the comic books themselves. I maybe dabbled with a graphic or novel or two as I was growing up, but it really wasn't until I hit college that I really started to delve into this hobby for myself. It was my third year at college. I was just getting out of kind of a rough breakup, and I had a buddy who would come over and kind of check on me, but he was also actually just starting to get into the comic book hobby, the subculture, and we lived in a place that there were a ton of just really cool local comic book shops, and he just tried to kind of spark my interest and share what he had found. I remember at the time he was really getting into things like Chris Claremont's Uncanny X-Men or Mike Grell's Green Arrow, things like that. But for me, I wanted to go all the way back to the beginnings of some of these characters that I knew just from mainstream pop culture, and my favorite at the time was The Amazing Spider-Man. I did have the old Marvel Essential volumes. For those that maybe don't know, they were really cheaply made black and white printed paperbacks that collected maybe the first 20 or 30 issues of a run. There'd be a volume 1, 2, 3, and so on, and you would just have a sequential run of a given comic book character or title, but they were really cheaply reprinted, like I said, no color. But it was a great way to read these stories before some of those digital services showed up, or you had to invest in something a little bit hefty like an omnibus edition, for example. But these were some of my earliest comics. I really liked Spider-Man. I really quickly found Spider-Man Blue, which is one of my absolute favorite standalone Spider-Man stories. So that's why I picked out these collections, because just early Spider-Man stuff I found, I really associate that with just my early readings as a comic book fan. So anyway, from there on, I started to make a couple more friends at college that were into comic books. We'd go to local shops, we'd trade collections to read and give back to each other, what have you. And I really started growing my collected edition collection. I think for me, once I got out of the Silver Age, I really wanted to read more modern stuff, and I found that single issues generally wouldn't tell a full story anymore. You'd need 4, 6, 12, sometimes more than that issues to just have one complete story. And I think that's for me when I decided to really dive into comic book collected editions rather than single issues. Yes, I do have a few, but in general, I'm a collected edition collector, and that's really what I showcase on my channel. But this is really how I got into comics, and I did have a long and windy road. I even mentioned earlier in this video, I did take a couple year hiatus from comics where I thought I was done, sold a lot of my collection. A lot of that was due to how I was failing to budget or maybe do this in a more healthy way, but more on that in my secret origin video if you're interested. But I think that'll do for this question. Okay, and the next question is, what is your favorite comic book or comic book run? So for me, this question has a bunch of answers, but my go-to favorite comic book run is Daredevil by Brian Michael Bendis and Alex Maleev from Marvel Comics, and I thought it could be fun to look through parts of that run today, but also I wanted to showcase a run I finally got to this calendar year that I also really love this year, and that is the Venom run by Donny Cates and Ryan Stegman. So go ahead and be looking at the first Ultimate Collection in paperback of that Daredevil run, and we'll flip through a couple pages of the Venom omnibus that collects that Donny Cates Ryan Stegman run. So for me, this is a true comic question. I think there are so many other answers I could have given too. I am quite partial to Lock and Key, for example, by Joe Hill. I also really like Transmetropolitan. That's another really good one. There's, of course, a lot of other answers too. Ed Brubaker's Captain America. But for me, I always love Daredevil by Brian Michael Bendis. Daredevil is my favorite character in no small part due to this run here. I dabbled with early Silver Age Daredevil. I think I somehow experienced Frank Miller sometime early in my journey as well, but I properly got into Daredevil when I started reading Guardian Devil by Kevin Smith, starting off that whole new volume of Daredevil, and then I've read that pretty much straight through to current, or at least into the Zdarsky run somewhere, so almost current. But once I got to Brian Michael Bendis, that was when this character just hit the stratosphere for me. I absolutely adore Daredevil, and it's hard for me to even say why. I love that he is just all of these opposites functioning at once. His day job is a lawyer where he fights for justice by the letter of the law, and yet by night he goes out as a vigilante, circumventing that very letter of the law. He's a deeply devout, religious man. He has Catholic background, and yet he fights dressed as a devil. We just have so many just interesting contrasts like this with this character. I think he's a deeply flawed character. He has a lot of unlucky relationships, and I just think he's just infinitely compelling. I really like how this character is done, and personally, I like my Daredevil a bit grittier, a bit crime noir, and darker edged, and I don't think anyone hit that tone quite as well as Bendis here. Although I do think Ed Brubaker, who followed immediately after Bendis, does get pretty darn close. Really a good run. I also wanted to talk about, like I mentioned, the Venom omnibus from Donny Cates. I wanted to throw this in here because this is probably my favorite comic book run I've read this year, so it's more of a contemporary choice for me. It's been out for a while now, but I finally had the pleasure of going through it, and I really dug it. The art from Stegman was just gruesome, graphic, and amazing. It is just jaw-droppingly beautiful. I think for this like edgy, dark character, there is so much warmth and heart and redemption in this Venom run, and you can just tell this is a huge passion project for Donny Cates. I have easily never cared for Venom quite as much or quite in the way I did during this run. I don't think it's overstating to call this run an absolute triumph. Way to go. Really good stuff. The next one is kind of a fun one from the guys over at Omnibus Cafe. Where do you see your YouTube channel in 3 years? I really love this question. I think for me, as a goal-oriented sort of person, I do have my own kind of hopeful projections, although I haven't really gone out 3 years yet. Maybe I need to have a 3-5-year plan. I think first and foremost for the channel, I hope that it's still around. I hope that it's thriving. I hope that the community grows and that I grow as a content creator. I know that I've learned a lot about this platform over the years, and yet I still feel like I'm at the bottom of the mountain. As far as what I'm showcasing to talk about, I am going to be looking at Junkyard Joe by Jeff Johns and Gary Frank, and Phenomena, Book 1 by Brian Michael Bendis. These are two titles that I'm picking for this question because another answer to this question, other than still being around, is I would like to work with more creators, I would like to work with more publishers, and I would like to get more connections into this industry because I just think it's fascinating. This is a hobby that I dearly love, and I've really liked opportunities I've had to kind of delve deeper into this world. And that occurred with both Junkyard Joe and Phenomena. In the case of Junkyard Joe, the unnamed kind of universe over there at Image was still kind of getting its start after Geiger, and someone from the marketing department reached out and said, hey, would I like an advanced reading of the first 3 issues of Junkyard Joe digital, and then can I provide a quick first look of the series, which I was happy to to do. I did get to see like PDFs of the second and third issue that weren't even, the coloring wasn't done. There were still outline notes and stuff. It was still very early on. I got to read them before release, and I thought this was so cool. Jeff Johns is easily one of my favorite writers, as well as Gary Frank being one of my favorite artists. This team is incredible. I loved already what I had read on Geiger, so this opportunity was just a dream. And even though I would say I prefer Geiger to Junkyard Joe overall, I still felt that title was really, really fun, and to have a bit of an inside track and get to read it a little bit early, I just felt really treated. Similarly, Phenomena, book 2 was just coming out, and I had the publisher of Abrams Books, or that publisher, Abrams Books, someone from their marketing department reach out to see if I'd want to review the first 2 books. They said if they did that, I would get the copies for free, and then they would send copies to a winner if I wanted to do a giveaway, which I happily jumped at for someone on the channel. Admittedly, this book is a young adult fantasy series, so it was a little bit out of my genre wheelhouse, but I had an absolute blast reading these. They were really, really fun. And like I said, when I think about my channel in 3 years, these 2 books are really indicative of a direction I hope to go, which is to have these opportunities to read and review books as they're coming out, sometimes beforehand, to have more of a through line with some of the publishing houses. And honestly, one of my big goals is to interview a creator for the channel. Since starting this, I've had opportunities to meet a few comic book creators. I've showcased that a bit on the channel for those that maybe just are checking me out. But I'd love an opportunity to actually sit down for an interview or to ask some quick questions to feature. I'd really, really enjoy that someday. So that's something I'm hoping to do. I think personally, on a smaller scale, I'm also hoping to get a more conducive kind of live stream setup at my home. One, to just do live streams with all of you, but also to collaborate with some of my favorite comic book YouTubers who I've been really eager to do partnered videos with. That's something in my channel I'd like to see as well. I'd also like to just experiment a bit more, break out of the box, and just create new kinds of comic book video content that I haven't seen around, that I hope caters to bigger audiences as well. I think that that would be a ton of fun. And then honestly, just also to foster the community I've already felt here on YouTube. Each and every one of you has been such a gift. I've really enjoyed getting to connect with some of you in the comments, or just having you guys watch my stuff. It really does mean a lot to me and has been a wonderful outlet. And the final question for today, which do you prefer, Marvel or DC Comics? Love this question. These are the big 2 comic book publishers. I'm a huge fan of both, but I have to say at the end of the day, and I've said it much before, I am more of a Marvel man. I love Marvel Comics. These are the characters I really surrounded myself with more, kind of coming up, and I just find myself gravitating more to their stories in general. And again, I have a huge love in my heart for DC, and I find that a lot of the YouTube space maybe seems to favor DC of these 2, but I for sure am in the Marvel pocket. I love the stuff in Marvel. To showcase that, I just thought I'd showcase some books that I'm currently reading or have just recently finished. To that end, we have the Spider-Man by Chip Zdarsky omnibus and the recently reprinted Thor by Walter Simonson omnibus. I did finish the Spider-Man Zdarsky omnibus this week at the time of the recording, and I loved it. I actually hope to do a review of this on my channel in the coming weeks. If you're interested, definitely subscribe. And then the Thor by Simonson is a run that I have started reading in the past but have never quite made my way through. I always hope for a copy of the omnibus edition. I am honestly a fan of the recoloring. I know that might be controversial, but the colors we have in this omnibus I think are a lot of fun. And so far this book is absolutely absorbing, gripping, and I'm having an absolute blast. As far as why I prefer Marvel, I think that the differences were maybe a little more pronounced kind of in the early Silver Age, like the 60s, where I felt like their characters had a bit more agency, and they felt a bit more flawed in a way that it was easier to connect with. Like looking like books like Fantastic Four, for example, you had kind of a dysfunctional family dynamic, or even Spider-Man, you had this teen hero that was always down on himself and felt like a reject, and that to me was so much easier to connect with than kind of the super shiny, just paragon, no flaws at all characters like Superman maybe at the time, and I'm a huge Superman fan as well, so it's a bit unfair, but I think that when I started my comic book journey reading those early Silver Age titles, the depth of characterization I felt in the Marvel books was a bit easier to just jump into. I felt a bit more immersed in it, and I felt like they were a bit more well-rounded as characters. I think as we've gone more contemporary, I think those lines have blurred quite a bit, and there's certainly examples of DC just wiping the floor with Marvel books and vice versa. And then I know there's a huge contingency that just are like independent books are reigning supreme. I certainly understand all those arguments, but I've just become a fan of Marvel. I think I just clicked with a lot of those characters early on, and I've just stuck around. I find a lot of Marvel writers and artists I've really liked as well. And again, I've really liked DC indie books I've read, but it's hard for me to get past some of the stuff at Marvel. I'm a huge fan of Daredevil, like I mentioned, Spider-Man, Fantastic Four, Silver Surfer, Wolverine, X-Men. Like, the list just keeps going, and I guess I could do that with DC too, but yeah, just Marvel. Marvel's my camp. I am also a fan of how many omnibuses Marvel seems to pump out. It makes collecting Marvel era stuff a bit easier in many ways, and I really appreciate that. I also like the consistency of the Marvel Omnibus editions with the Marvel Omnibus logo on the top, at least for the most part. But yeah, I think overall, I'm a Marvel fan. That's where I've been at. And it was certainly exciting, or has been exciting, to ride the Marvel Cinematic Universe film franchise wave for over a decade now. I know we're in kind of a precarious place, but I'm still on board, having a lot of fun. Okay, and that's going to bring us to the end of the video. I hope you've enjoyed my little Q&A session about me, Dominic, here at the Comic Book Report. If you are from Omnibus Cafe and you've stuck with me, again, welcome. I hope you enjoy the channel. You can look at my back catalog for a lot of comic book reviews, list videos. And for anyone listening, I am planning to do a lot of fun stuff as we approach the back half of the year here. I'm planning kind of a big mid-year check-in video where I'm looking at some of my favorites so far, what I'm looking for the back half of the year, things like that. So I'm hoping to have that up on the channel in a few weeks. Hoping to crank out a few more omnibus reviews as well. I went on a little bit of a break from some omnibuses, but I'm starting to get back into the just rhythm with them. Really love doing that. And then hopefully I'll have a long-awaited collection tour video. I know that it's been really requested. Haven't done it yet, but I'm hoping to do it before the end of the year. So stay tuned. And thanks everyone for taking this journey. Until next time, this has been the Comic Book Report. Please don't forget to leave your like or comment. And thank you so much for watching. Have a good one.